Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville, South Carolina, and you can find all of my contact information down below in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs here in the Greenville area or elsewhere. I can refer you out to our relocations department if you're looking for real estate outside of the Greenville area as well. And just a reminder, as always, please like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, all of those good things with regard to the show. Make sure we get it out to as many people as possible. And just a reminder, final reminder, this episode is sponsored by Piper Insurance Group, my go-to for home, auto, and umbrella insurance. They're an independent insurance agency, so they can quote multiple different insurance companies and bring back the best rate they can find. They're licensed in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, and they can help you with investment properties as well, not just owner-occupants. So they can help you with flips, rentals, ground-up new construction, residential, commercial, etc. So please reach out to them for all of your real estate, auto, and umbrella insurance needs. All right, I just got a text message here, so I'm going to silence my phone. Rookie mistake here, forgetting to do that prior to recording. But we're here in the month of December. And I always do, and I like the month of December from the standpoint of my podcast because there's a lot of end of year kind of things. And then beginning of year, as we go into January, things that I like to discuss with you guys, prognosticating, thinking about the future, thinking about what's happening. And today, I want to just discuss 10 questions for the future of real estate that I have, right? This has been a very, let's just say introspective year for real estate, right? It's caused a lot of us to think long and hard about what does the future actually look like? Because we've had some major changes in the real estate world, and we're only seeing the beginning of those changes, right? What we did is we saw the first domino fall. Whether you want to, multiple first dominoes, right? We've had, obviously, the issue of high mortgage rates, which has been the dominant story since the middle of 2022. But then we also had the lawsuit that was lost by the National Association of Realtors, the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit, combined with things that the Department of Justice has been doing to basically try to, in my opinion, over-regulate and over-litigate the real estate industry. Regardless of whether my take on that is accurate or not, some people disagree with me, that's fine. Changes are coming. And that was just, if people think that the changes all already happened in 2024, you are sorely mistaken. We're still working out a ton of stuff, and there's still a ton of stuff left to be worked out here. And so I just want to discuss 10 questions for the future of real estate. I'm not going to have all the answers to these questions. I'm not going to, the whole reason why I'm wording this as questions to the future of real estate is that I don't have the answers. But these are things that, questions that I think you can formulate in your own mind what you think the answer should be. I will give some thoughts on my own as well. And we'll just kind of go from there. I put a lot of thought into this, actually. I changed these 10 questions multiple different times, so hopefully this will be interesting for you guys as we look into the future. Question number 1 that I have is, will realtor commissions and compensation go down? Right? This was when the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit was lost by the National Association of Realtors, and then they came out with the settlement, right? That we keep hearing so much about. The settlement talked a lot about realtor compensations, particularly as it pertained to buyer's agents, right? So the traditional model was that buyer's agents were kind of, you might consider it subsidized through the sale of the transaction. So the listing brokerage had the entire amount of compensation that both agents were going to be paid. And then the listing broker, the listing agent, would then split usually half of that with the buyer's agent. Well, the Department of Justice doesn't like that. They think that there's been price fixing in the marketplace, which is ridiculous. We've talked about that before. There's not ever been any price fixing in real estate before when it comes to commissions. But regardless, what the Department of Justice wants, they don't want for listing brokers to be subsidizing buyer agents in any way, shape, or form. What do they want? They want for either buyers to pay their buyer's agents directly or for the sellers to pay for the buyer agent directly. At least that's what we think at the moment. This is why we're seeing some brokerages, such as my own, that are on top of this, saying we're no longer doing what we call cooperating compensation. Now we are simply saying compensation for a buyer's agent is negotiable. And then, when a buyer's agent brings an offer on a listing, then at that point, if compensation is being offered by the seller, it goes directly from seller to buyer's agent. That's the way my company's doing it. And so immediately, that's kind of an aside, but immediately after the settlement came out, all the headlines were, and even President Biden went out and in a very public way discussed this too. A lot was out there saying that buyer agent commissions were either going down or just going away, right? And that homeowners were suddenly going to find all these cost savings, and suddenly things just got a lot cheaper. And all I'm going to do is speak from my perspective. I simply haven't seen that. Now, I can't speak to everywhere in the country, but to me, it's been business as usual, just like it has in the past, with the one exception being that now we have to do additional legwork to confirm whether the seller is willing to compensate a buyer's agent, and then confirm how much they are compensating, right? Because it is fully negotiable. They can compensate $0 towards a buyer's agent and just say, you know what? The buyer has to pay for the buyer's agent. They have to do that themselves. Or they can offer any amount, right? It doesn't matter. It can be a percentage. It could be a flat fee. It could be bananas. It could be oranges. It could be a used car. Whatever you want to compensate with, they're allowed to do that. It is fully negotiable, and the Department of Justice wants the general public to know that. And the general public should know that. Now, what I've said in the past that I want to make sure that I'm careful on is that compensation is negotiable on the front end, right? When you're talking to when you're coming up with a contract, including a buyer agency agreement, that's when that discussion needs to happen. After you've already gone through the whole process and you're at the end, you're about to close on the home, that's not the time to bring up compensation and try to renegotiate your compensation agreement with the seller or with your agent. And I'm not saying you can't do that. And just to be clear on that, you absolutely can, in the middle of a contract, of any contract, try to renegotiate. So don't hear me that I'm saying that that's not allowed to be done, and I'm not discouraging people from doing that in a vacuum. But just like it is when you go under contract to purchase real estate, right? If I say to a seller, I'm going to buy your house for $300,000, and then we get through everything, we get to the end of it, and I'm like, actually, I'm only going to offer you $250. Well, that's not going to make anyone happy, right? You've already gone through the whole process. You've already gone through your due diligence, appraisal, everything's worked out, and now you're trying to renegotiate. And that's all that I'm saying, is that sometimes buyers will and consumers will not understand that the negotiation process for any of these sorts of things is best done on the front end rather than in the middle. Because once you've agreed to compensate someone, just like if I'm an employer, and I have been, by the way, I used to own a frozen yogurt shop. If I told my employees, here's what you're getting paid, and then later wanted them to agree in writing that they're getting paid less, that doesn't leave a good taste in anyone's mouth. So that negotiation should be done on the front end. But all of that to be said, it's all negotiable, and it's negotiable the entire way through. There are some best practices to consider. But at the end of the day, buyer's agents are still getting paid, and I think that they should still be getting paid an appropriate amount, because otherwise we don't have full-time buyer's agents, right? If they can't get paid a livable wage, they can't work full-time. And if buyer's agents can't be full-time, I can tell you what it's like working with the part-time agents. It's awful. It's bad. They don't know what they're doing. They're not trained. They don't have time to focus to perfect their craft. The past 2 months, I have been in 48 hours worth of classes. 48 hours. Okay? No, more than that. 56 hours of classes. And I do that, and it's all real estate oriented. And I'm actually going to a class next week that I'm really excited about to become a licensed tour guide in Greenville, South Carolina as well, because I handle so many relocations as well. These are the sorts of things that professional full-time realtors do. We're constantly pushing the ball forward on our education. We're constantly improving our craft. But guess what? If we can only operate as part-time agents because there's just not enough money out there, then we can't do that. We end up focusing on the things that do bring us money, and then we end up not being very good at real estate. And again, I've seen this over and over again from part-time agents. So the good news is that that compensation, realtor compensation, is still pretty much the same, and not because of any price fixing. It's just that people understand that realtors need to get paid, and the general public is still compensating their realtors in a way that allows those agents to make a livable wage if those agents are good. Question number 2. Will homes struggle appraising with a slowing market? This is a great question, right? And I saw there's an appraiser that I hope to have an appraiser soon on this show, but there was an appraiser that I was seeing on social media talking about this recently, that, you know what? The market is slowing, and there are some pockets of the greater Greenville area that you can kind of expect low appraisals to happen, because if you're, assuming that a home is worth 5, 6, 7% more than it would have been worth last year, that might not be the case anymore. We've already talked about this. The rate of appreciation has slowed dramatically, and there's no guarantee that an appraiser is going to look at a home and say, yeah, it's worth that amount. Have I had low appraisals this year? Yes, I have. I've had multiple of them. And I think that that's going to continue to happen. Again, there's going to be a question of how much demand do we get this year, right? Because by every metric, 2024 was a pretty slow year. And what happens is there's a lag to that, right? So what's happening now in terms of the market does impact what will happen 3 to 6 months from now. And from an appraiser's perspective, remember, they're looking back 3 to 6 months, sometimes 9 to 12 months. So if things are really slow now, and then appraisers 3 to 6 months are looking back and comparing things to when it was really slow, that could be bad for appraisals. I do think low appraisals are coming in 2025. Sellers need to be prepared for that. Now you're no longer just battling the market, but you're also going to be battling what the market was like 6 to 12 months ago, which could be really bad in some situations. Some appraisers that aren't up to speed as much as others on what's going on might put people in a double jeopardy kind of situation. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but I do think that we're going to run into some appraisal struggles in 2025. Question number 3, is clear cooperation staying or going? Okay, this is a little little inside baseball for realtors, but I'm going to explain it. Clear cooperation basically means that realtors can't have pocket listings. Okay, well, that's also inside baseball. What does that mean? Here's what that means. If I have a seller that comes to me and say that they want me to market their house to sell, as a realtor, I have one option, and that is to get them into a written listing agreement. Now, in South Carolina, we have 2 ways of doing that, right? It's the same listing agreement, but you can either list a home off MLS, and in that case, you can only market it off MLS specifically within your brokerage is the primary means of which you're marketing it. So only to other seed and joiner agents. What about the other option? The other option is that then you can put on MLS, and this is where clear cooperation comes into play. Clear cooperation says that when you have a public listing, you have to make it public. You have to make it so that everyone can see it. You can't just make a public listing public to only a handful of people. Therefore, a listing that's supposed to be advertised to the entire public must go in the multiple listing service. Okay, that might not be the best way to explain it, but that's the way that makes sense in my brain. So even though we do have this brokerage exclusive option, there's not a whole lot of, that's a really small part of the pie in terms of listings that are out there. Like my company at any given time might have 10 to 15 brokerage exclusive listings. The vast majority of them are going on the multiple listing service because most of the time it makes the most sense for sellers to get the most exposure for their house as possible. And me as a listing agent, I want the most exposure for my listings as possible. Well, there's a question now whether this clear cooperation policy, which dictates that we must put these listings on the multiple listing service so that other agents can see them and so that their clients can see them, whether that might be going away in light of all of the changes to the industry. It's very interesting. I've followed this very closely because I'm on the board of directors for the Greenville Association of Realtors. And so this is a big topic of discussion that impacts us directly on the board. And I have seen very mixed opinions on this from like-minded people. Some people think that clear cooperation should go away, right? That agents should be able to do whatever they want with their listings. If a seller comes to them and says, I want you to sell this property, they should have every tool at their disposal. And maybe the MLS, there are certain situations where putting a home in the MLS doesn't make sense. And perhaps, in South Carolina, we have this other brokerage exclusive option. Well, maybe you want another option, a third option. I've heard that argument. I've also heard the argument, which I think is more compelling, that clear cooperation should remain. Because if clear cooperation goes away, then basically you're running the risk for a lot of ethical infringements, right? You could market the property, for instance, to people only of a certain skin color or of a certain religious background, things of that nature. And obviously that creates a big problem because this is something that the real estate industry has worked really hard to ensure that we don't have situations where we're excluding a demographic of the public from being able to purchase real estate because that's wrong. The other thing is if clear cooperation goes away, what is the most likely scenario? Well, the most likely scenario would be that the big brokerages would thrive and the tiny brokerages would get destroyed. And here's why. The big brokerages can throw their weight around and they could just create their own client portals and just say, you know what, right now it's pretty rare to have what we call these brokerage exclusive listings and you can't put them on your website. But if clear cooperation went away, all the major brokerages could list everything just on their own websites. And now all of a sudden the public has to go to C. Dan Joyner's website, KW's website, CBC's website, all these different brokerages' websites to try to find these listings. Well, guess what? If you're XYZ Real Estate and you have 3 agents with you, and between the 3 agents there's 5 listings, who's going to go on that website, right? Now, might there be options for consolidating all of this? Yes, an aggregator like a Zillow. But currently, Zillow is pulling from what we call IDX feeds, which they're pulling data directly from the MLS. They don't have the capability to pull directly from websites. So that would create individual brokerage websites. That would create a whole can of worms. And like I said, the brokerages that would absolutely benefit from clear cooperation going away are the big ones. And so there's going to be a lot of kicking and screaming from the tiny brokerages if clear cooperation goes away, at least the ones that understand what they're doing. It's a big problem for them. I tend to think it's going to stay, but this is one that I really don't know because, like I said, I have seen some very differing opinions on this, and it's unclear what the Department of Justice wants. The Department of Justice probably would like it to go away, but then they also don't want all the downsides of it going away. They want to have their cake and eat it too, which they have done this whole time. And they can't, obviously. So that'll be an interesting one to monitor. We'll see what happens in 2025. We should get some answers in 2025 with regard to that. What about, I mentioned multiple listing service. What will happen to multiple listing services? A lot of people don't really understand how this works. In fact, I listened to one of my favorite podcasts is called Odd Lots. Great podcast done by Joe Weisenberg and Tracy Alloway, I believe, is the other co-host on there. With Bloomberg. And they do a great job just talking about all sorts of different things with the economy. But one of their worst episodes was one where they talked about the multiple listing service and how that works. Because multiple listing services are local. In Greenville, in the greater Greenville area, we have multiple of them. We've got a western upstate one, which is kind of Anderson County-ish, Pickens County-ish. We've got the greater Greenville Association of Realtors has its own MLS. Spartanburg Association has their own. Greenwood Association has their own. And there are others that aren't too far away as well. So we have several MLSs. Now, Greenville is by far the biggest in this area. But we have a lot of different multiple listing services. So if you've got an agent that is based out of Spartanburg and they don't want to pay for Greenville, they're just going to use the Spartanburg MLS. And those that are searching in the Greenville MLS might not see, they might miss what's happening in Spartanburg. And so right now there's a big question of whether MLSs, as part of all of these changes, are going to be opening up to non-members or perhaps even secondary members, right? So one of the biggest benefits of being a realtor right now is that you have, as a realtor, direct access to the MLS, which is a super powerful tool. All this historical data, running comps, all sorts of different things you can do to it. Well, we're already seeing some MLSs making a second tier in order to try to make sure that they don't run into trouble with the Department of Justice, creating a second tier of membership that allows for non-realtors, non-appraisers to be able to join the multiple listing service. Is that going to happen in Greenville? I don't know. I've not heard rumblings of that up to this point, so don't take this as me spreading a rumor. I'm just saying I've heard that other MLSs are doing it. I have no idea if that's going to happen in Greenville or not. What about realtor associations? Are they going to go away? Will we see realtor associations and or multiple listing services merge or get bought out? Again, I don't know if any of that is going to happen. Usually the way it works is the Realtor Association and the MLS are two distinct organizations that have some overlap. So in Greenville, the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors is a nonprofit organization, and the Multiple Listing Service is a for-profit company that's owned by the Association of Realtors, right? So that's the structure, and that's a pretty common structure when it comes to MLSs. Well, might we find that some MLSs want to get out of the game, smaller ones, and want to get, or perhaps need to? Maybe they owe money, who knows what. There's a whole lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and maybe they need to merge or get bought out by a larger MLS. If that were to happen locally, I can assure you that Greenville will not be the one getting bought out. That much I can tell you. Now, I've not looked at the financials for these other MLSs. I don't know what Spartanburg or Western Upstate or Greenwood or any of these others. I don't know what all is going on in their finances, and I'm not going to create a rumor that any of them might be interested in being bought out or merging or anything like that. I'm just saying that is certainly a possibility moving forward, because we're seeing that in some other markets. Would it shock me if it came to the market here? No, it would not. Question number 5. What will happen with the pent-up demand in the market? I saw a really interesting thing from Freddie Mac recently that they said that unaffordability, basically the combination of high real estate prices along with the high mortgage rates that we have right now, have caused around 1 million new home formations to not happen. Now, this is Freddie Mac. This isn't a National Association of Realtors, right? Some people don't like the statistics that the NAR comes out with because it always seems optimistic. It always seems like the best is yet to come. But no, this is from Freddie Mac, okay? And they are not known to be, overly or irrationally optimistic. But a number like this makes you think that maybe the best is yet to come, right? 1 million new home formations haven't happened the past several years due to unaffordability. In other words, 1 million households worth of people in the United States right now are currently living with friends or relatives until they can afford either to rent or buy a home on their own. That's a lot of people, right? I mean, 1 million formations, you have to think that that's probably between 2 to 4 million individuals, 1 million household formations. So that's pent up demand, right? That's people, nobody wants to live with their friends or relatives. Everyone wants to have their own place. And so what's going to happen with all of that pent up demand? And I really have no idea. At some point, that demand has to enter the marketplace, you'd think. But will people, will 20-somethings currently living with their parents continue to live with their parents until, maybe their parents just let them have that house later on. Maybe their parents have multiple homes and their parents decide, we'll stay at the lake house. You can have our house. If that were the case, then that demand will never enter the marketplace. Or will things get more affordable? Probably not so much on the price side of things, but on the mortgage rate side of things. And now some of that demand gets unleashed. Will it be unleashed like a dam breaking? Or will it be released like a trickle? Again, these are questions that we don't know, but these are big, big questions going into the year. And there's a lot of optimism. I'm seeing a lot of optimism for 2025. Hopefully it's not misplaced. I think some of that is partisan optimism, right? People that are optimistic right now because there's a new president coming into the White House in January. That is not a source of optimism for me personally, not because I'm inherently anti this candidate or anti that candidate or pro this candidate, pro that candidate. If you listen to the show, you know that. I just don't think that the president has as much impact on these things as other people do. So this will be very interesting to watch and just see, okay, we've got a ton of pent up demand. Is it going to enter the marketplace and when? Question number 6. Will the housing market receive stimulus in 2025 and or 2026? This is obviously a huge question. I've thought about this a lot, and I really don't know. My hunch is that if the housing market rebounds in a meaningful way in spring or summer of 2025, that we will avoid any sort of stimulus being, thrown at the real estate market. But if it doesn't, and if 2025 ends up being a down year like 2024 and 2023 have been for real estate, I absolutely could see stimulus coming in either this year or probably more likely 2026. Really, the question, I think, is going to be whether the housing market is a drag to the economy as a whole, because we know for a fact that Trump is really laser focused on the economy. It doesn't mean that he will have good ideas for the economy, but he is focused on it. He's very focused on how people feel about the economy as well. So right now, people feel great, right? Crypto's up, stock market's up. Real estate is not inherently up, but there is more optimism for it. There's a bunch of data that just came out this week. Optimism from small businesses for 2025, from mega corporations for 2025. So there's a lot of optimism right now. But this happens after every presidential election. So I don't think that anyone should draw major conclusions from that. If that optimism starts to wane, and it will, and if it starts to wane big time, that's when I think we could start to see some government measures come in. And Trump, the thing that makes me think that probably a stimulus wouldn't happen until 2026, more likely, if not maybe end of 2025, but probably more likely 2026. That wasn't something that Trump really ran on when it came to the housing market. And of course, he's going to have to. There's going to be a lot of pushing and pulling and navigating when it comes to Trump's relationship with the Federal Reserve. So I think he's going to be pretty focused on that at first, pretty focused on a lot of other things. And then I think perhaps, if the housing market hasn't rebounded by 2026, I think at that point, it's very likely that we would see the president get involved. Number 7, will realtors drop out and find other work? Okay, this is a big question from a lot of different people, and a question from a lot of different angles, right? Realtors, I've already said it's hard to operate in this market right now. And a lot of agents right now are struggling to find work. I've talked to some recently that haven't had closings in months. And when that happens, they drop out and they find other work. But I also am looking at the membership rolls in the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors, and membership is staying steady. We're replacing people that are dropping out. And so we're not seeing any sort of mass dropout or mass decrease in realtor membership right now. And so this is a big question that I have. And a lot of realtors too are still kind of holding on to their license just in case, okay, maybe things get better. Maybe with this new Trump administration, maybe things will get better. There's a lot of that sort of thing happening. But if 2025 is bad for realtors, I could absolutely see a lot of realtors dropping out and membership going way down. If things improve, you'll see a lot of realtors re-entering the market again. Number 8, pivoting to local government here. We've talked a lot about the president, but let's talk about county council for a second. Will county council do what is necessary to continue improving Greenville and making housing more affordable? That's a big question, right? We've got a brand new county council, basically, right now. We're going to have essentially a split, half and half, 6 quote-unquote establishment county council people, the old guard, and 6 that are relatively new, several that are brand new. And so it's a big question of what is the county council going to do, right? The biggest improvement that needs to happen is to the roads in Greenville County. Well, unfortunately, to me, now people disagreed with me on this, and I'm not going to rehash it again. You can go back and listen to previous episodes if you want to hear me discuss this. But we had the possibility for a penny sales tax to be passed, and it just barely failed. And had that been passed, then a lot of roads would have been repaired in Greenville. People think that the money would have gone towards other things. It wouldn't have gone towards other things. That was a misinformation campaign spread by a handful of bad faith parties. So what will county council do to, now that money isn't there, what are they going to do to improve the roads in Greenville? I'm not sure. I have no idea what their plan is. They don't have a plan at the moment. And so I would say in 2025, there's not going to be any major improvements to Greenville County that stem from the county council. It's going to be up to the private sector. This county council, they're going to have this whole 6-6 split thing, and it might even, they might even be able to turn it into a 7-5 split, with the new guard being able to bring some people from the old guard over into their agenda. And if that happens, they're basically hyper anti-tax, and basically let's just keep things the same and just try to minimize people's tax bills. Listen, I'm a big fan of conservative fiscal approaches to the government, but that doesn't fix roads, right? That doesn't improve the county. And guess what? Private entities aren't allowed to do it either. You say, well, in the libertarian dream, private entities do that. Yeah, but we're not in the libertarian dream. Private entities can't go out and fix the roads. That's illegal for them to do. And so it has to be done on the county, city, or state level. And at the moment, all the signals are that it's not going to be done. What about making housing more affordable? That one, I can tell you almost assuredly, county council is not going to do anything to make housing more affordable. As it is this past year, they increased property taxes on us, which was a bait and switch that honestly resulted in some people getting voted out. Some longtime county council people got voted out because of that tax increase. I didn't like the property tax increase. I was against that. And you guys can go back and listen when I talked about that, because that was a bait and switch. They said, well, because of inflation, we need to increase property taxes. There's already a mechanism in the property tax code for inflation, and that's that they can reassess the value of real estate every so many years, and after different circumstances that happen, such as a transfer, such as a sale. And so they basically said, no, we need another inflation measure to bring in more taxes. Now, I've heard that some of the newer people in county council want to repeal that, which I would actually be in favor of that. But again, what people want, like the county to be improved, and that costs money. It costs money to do projects. And so, right now the county council seems pretty focused on paying for more parks and things like that. Is that really the need right now? Like, everyone loves parks, but do we need more parks? We've got quite a few parks in Greenville County. I mean, that's not a struggle that we have. And so I have a lot of questions for what county council is going to do. As you can probably tell, I'm not super optimistic. But we'll let them operate. We'll see what 2025 brings. We'll see if these two factions now in our council can play in the sandbox together, and let's see what happens. Number 9, will there be any more core changes to the core paperwork / contracts that we use in our local real estate market? We've had a lot of changes the past year as a result of all of these changes that have happened, changes to the core paperwork. That's always a huge impact on realtors and on the public, right? Because we all have to learn all this new paperwork, all this new language. So I have questions for that. And I think the short answer is that yes, there's going to be more changes coming. We know that there's going to be more changes coming. It's just a matter of how systemic these changes are going to be. I think that they're probably going to be, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like, scrap the contract you have, it's going to be completely rewritten, and 1 being like just changing a sentence or two. I think it's probably going to be like a 3. It's probably going to be some minor changes here and there, and then some that are a little bit more substantial, but nothing that's going to reinvent the wheel. Last but not least, number 10, will developers keep developing at the pace that they have? A lot of people don't realize that development in Greenville County is actually slower than it is in most of the Southeast. Greenville is not growing in residential units to the extent that other areas that have the population growth that we have are growing. So we actually do, we're underbuilding. A lot of people don't want to hear that, but we are underbuilding currently. And I think that that's going to get worse. I think there's going to be increased underbuilding because it's becoming increasingly more and more difficult to get county approval, permitting, and all of that's necessary for building subdivisions, for building apartments, developments, all of that. And so I don't think developers are going to be able to keep the pace. I think things are going to slow down a lot, and that's going to cause home prices to go up. And if you can't have it both ways, right? This is another one of these both ways conversations. People want prices to go down, but they also want building and development to stop. Another thing that drives me crazy, people want commercial development, but they don't want residential. Well, commercial development means jobs for people, right? If you build commercial, you're building offices, you're building retail, you're building restaurants, things of that nature. People want all of that, but then the people that come in to work those jobs don't have a place to live, and people don't want the developers to build places for those workers to live. So that's a problem. And I don't see that problem getting better. I see that problem getting worse because there is such a strong NIMBY, not in my backyard, influence in Greenville County right now. And that was reflected in who was voted into county council this past year. And so I think the developers are going to have to really, it's gonna get to a point where they're going to really, really tone down and curtail how much development that they've been doing. And personally, I don't think that that's a positive for most people in real estate. It's a positive if you own real estate, right? Your real estate values are likely to go up as a result of this, but it's not good for Greenville as a whole. So hopefully the county council will be able to get their act together and figure out the best way to handle all of these challenges. So those are my 10 questions. Let me know if you guys have any of your own questions. If you have any thoughts, feedback on any of that, you can always shoot me a text, email, whatever. My contact information is in the show notes. Leave a comment on YouTube. Leave a rating or a review. I appreciate all of those things from you guys. And please reach out to Piper Insurance for a free insurance quote today. And we will talk again next time.